Hello, welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in the series Freemasonry and Satanism, number 79, part 1. I say part 1 because I may make part 2 on these videos. Number 78, I did part 1, and I may go back to that book and do part 2. Anyways, I don't know what I'm going to do on the next video as I research my books and comes to my mind, my intuition. And that's what happened in this case. Invisible Horizons. True Mysteries of the Seas. Vincent Gaddis. Here on the back of this book, apparently 2 men sailors were asphyxiated on a gasoline tanker. And when you die aboard ship at sea, they, I guess, throw some weights around you and toss you into the sea. 1,400 feet of water. In the days that followed, the waves behind the ship showed their faces. I know what you're thinking. You can see something in almost anything, like a cloud or whatever. But these images were consistent and always side by side. So one has to ponder, what the heck is going on? Just like with the series I'm doing now on Project Montauk, where they were supposedly opening portals to other places in time, other dimensions maybe. Abducting young boys from Boston, New York City, and the area, pushing them into these tunnels, and generally speaking, not able to retrieve them. And the ones that did come back, they were questioned as to what they saw. And also, they were seriously into mind control program, experimenting on the young boys, all run by the intelligence services, maybe the Department of the Navy, Army, Air Force, along with the Philadelphia experiment, the Phoenix Project, or the Rainbow Project as it was called. Strangely enough, the Phoenix word itself has something to do with the occult and the New Age and the return of the Golden Age. Pagan propaganda, Mystery School of Babylon, witchcraft, Kabbalah, Hollywood, the banksters, the wealthy folks of the world deceiving the rest of us, destroying the middle class in these days. This is 2016, the first day of the year. January 1. And here I am making more videos. So I've got something very interesting to read here. And why this book, you ask? If I'm doing the Peter Moon, Preston Nichols, Al Bebeck, Stuart Swervelow, Project Montauk, Philadelphia Experiment. Well, it just so happens this book was referenced. And the last chapter of this book, Is There an Answer? And they talk about the Philadelphia Experiment. Did the U.S. Navy, in a classified experiment during wartime, secretly apply Dr. Albert Einstein's unified field theory and successfully cause a warship and its crew to become invisible? So that's the last part of this book, which I will do in the second half of this video. The first part of this book, I'll start out with chapter 6. Now remember, this is Freemasonry and Satanism, this series of videos I'm making. And we're up to now 79. Wow. All right. Let's jump right into this. The haunts and the horrors. Just as there are haunted houses, whatever the term may mean, there are haunted ships. Like houses, moreover, there may be quite ordinary or even happy ships on which from time to time apparitions, either benevolent or malign, are alleged to appear. Apparitions, ghosts, beings, feelings, evil entities. But there are also ships that themselves appear to be haunted by other ships or by some absolutely terrifying something that affects them as well as the people aboard them. There was, or is, a ghost aboard the historic U.S. frigate Constellation at the National Shrine at Fort McHenry, Baltimore. If the phantom is a figment of someone's imagination, it's an unusual photogenic figment. The ghost was photographed by Lieutenant Commander Alan Ross Broadham. The story and a photograph appeared in the Baltimore Sun, December 31st, 1955. Under the byline of feature writer Patrick Catling, the article quotes the officer as follows. The first hint that something unusual might be going on was observed last September. Firemen said they heard strange noises and saw strange shapes aboard. The same phenomenon was reported by the gangway watch of the nearby submarine Pike. I regard the whole affair with a certain amount of skepticism, but I told it to a friend who makes a hobby of psychic research. That's how I started out in this whole research investigation of mine. I started out in psychic research after I started buying books by famous scientists, as I have said earlier, Nikola Tesla, etc. And I read the old books, the biographies, and they all had psychic abilities, most of them when they were young. Their parents were usually in the church ministers, so they were praying. So what did that have to do with higher levels of psychic abilities? Or they got hit in the head, fell from a tree, altered the blood flow to the brain, and acquired psychic abilities. So about 75 to 80%, they were kind of psychic when they were young, and 20-25% had some kind of accident. Just interesting FYI. So the nearby submarine Pike, the gangway watch officer, saw some strange shapes aboard and strange noises on the ship Constellation. I regarded the whole affair with a certain amount of skepticism, but I told it to a friend who makes a hobby of psychic research. He did not seem surprised, but told me that the best time of year to observe such apparitions is at midnight between Christmas and New Year. And I'm only reading my highlighted portions. You can get the book, Invisible Horizons, True Mysteries of the Sea. When was this book published? 1965. Commander Broadham describes the phantom as a bluish-white radiancy, partly translucent, wearing a definitely dated uniform. So the apparition, the ghost, bluish-white radiancy. And remember when they said the Aldridge, the ship in the Philadelphia experiment, when it actually disappeared, it had some kind of greenish tint radiation. Just saying. So this phantom on the ship, bluish-white radiancy, partly translucent, wearing a definitely dated uniform, gold-striped trousers, crooked hat, cocked hat, heavy gold ambulance, and a sword. It or he was, it seemed to be a captain. The photograph shows a faint but distinct figure of a man in early Navy uniform crossing the quarterdeck. The frigate had 8 captains during her career, and it is assumed that the apparition represented one of those men. In the folklore of the sea, there are traditional ghosts, and one of the most famed is Lady Lips. Lady Lips, a phantom of the Pacific, without a lower jaw. So apparently this ghost had the lower jaw missing. In the older generation of men and ships, over 500 sailors aboard American and British vessels have witnessed his appearance. Lady Lips only appears during very severe storms, standing in places where it would be impossible for a living man to be. In addition to the missing jaw, he is distinguished by a corpse-white face and a dead fish odor. For many years, the legend of Lady Lips was forgotten, although his name lived on. Then in 1928, a member of the crew of the tramp steamer Woolley found a log on the Villa de Paris on one of the Duke of Gloucester Islands. So moving on. Strong winds, however, blew the boat far from land to the west. So apparently how this the ship had sunk earlier, and the crew and the captain boarded a skiff, a smaller boat, and tried to make it up the coast after the ship had sunk. But the wind blew them offshore, further away from land. At last their food gave out and they were starving. Desperate, they began fishing for sharks with funnel as bait on the end of a boat hook. A large shark took the bait, then began lashing about, and the boat hook was jerked from the shark, from the hands of the weakened men. The hook handle struck Lady Lips on the chin, tearing away his jaw. So a big shark was thrashing about, and part of the hook ripped his jaw right off his face. Oh my. Lady Lips, in agony, and knowing that nothing could save him, remember they had no food or water and they were dying, drew his knife, slashed his wrist, and held them out to his men. So I guess they were going to drink his blood and eat his body. They were starving and they were thirsty. 5 of the men lived to reach the Pacific island, the name of which they did not know. Grimly, the log ends, sighting the island by the month of June 1783, all the survivors of the longboat, excepting only the sailing master Lady Lips, who was eaten at sea, landed and hoisted English colors. Just some interesting stories here when we have to ponder the Philadelphia experiment and time tunnels. Just saying, what is possible? And I think, was it Jesus that said, with God all things are possible? I'll have to look that up for the exact quote. Piercy Pryor, who retired from the U.S. Navy in 1931 and settled in Australia, was responsible for collecting much data about Lady Lips. His interest began when he personally saw the specter in 1929 while serving aboard the destroyer USS Stoddard during a storm off Puget Sound. So he personally witnessed this Lady Lips, this ghost without a lower jaw, and he started researching it. Pryor says that appearances of lady lips have been recorded in the logs of other American warships, as well as those of British vessels, including the HMS Iron Duke, Ramillies, the battleship Queen Elizabeth I, and the destroyer Broke. The much more attractive white lady is usually seen in the Atlantic. So now we have another ghost called the White Lady. In the year 1863, Captain Richard Brown set sail for Cardiff, Wales, in the merchant vessel Usk, bound for Hoocha, Peru. He had been delayed by bad weather, but the weather was fair as he approached Cape Horn. One evening he was standing on the quarterdeck when among the shrouds a beautiful lady materialized. Clad in flowing white veils, she came down and walked over to the astonished captain. So you have this beautiful lady in a white robe appear out of nowhere and walk over to the captain. She says, "Go back to the port from which you came." She said quietly, but firmly, "If you continue, you will lose your ship and your life. It is so ordained." Well, who ordained this? And you know, I'm skeptical of most of this stuff also. But when you read it in so many books, and I have many, many more, we will go over this and over this and over this until maybe we can discover what is this reality we live in all about. What is reality? Is there a fourth dimension? Are we spiritual beings in these biological bodies? What are the Freemasons, Illuminati, Zionists, Jesuits up to with the New World Order and New Age? Why are they trying to destroy Christianity? And why are they bringing us a New Age and Luciferian doctrine with apparently the gay agenda leading this decadent parade? As Hitler was trying to do, they want to de-domesticate mankind. They want to bring about anarchy and chaos, as George Bush said, to bring about a new world order, which basically is slavery for all us lowly beings, middle class gone, and the elites will live as pharaohs and kings and Caesars maybe. Just saying, what is real? Why are they sending drones all over the USA? FEMA camps, hollow point bullets, Jade Helm exercises, and then that new thing I've been going over with the Model United Nations Association establishing organizations in all the city, towns, and villages with the mayors and officials, unbeknownst to we the people. Go look up Lisa Haven in Model United Nations Association. Don't believe me. Do your own research. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about unusual apparitions. So anyways, this guy saw this beautiful lady appear, and she said, "Go back to the port whence you came, or you shall die." So the captain turned around the boat and went back without delivering the ship's goods. The angered owners notified authorities, and a hearing was held. It was pointed out the vessel had gone 4 months, and expenses for food, clothing, and wages was heavy. The cargo of coal and iron was still aboard, and all the captain could say was that he had been warned by a ghost. So the owners of the ship had the captain punished, and his license removed, his ability to captain ships. At last, the Usk again set sail for Peru. Several months later, the owners received word from Cocumba, Chile, that the Usk had been destroyed by a fire at sea. So I guess the beautiful lady in white that appeared to warn the captain knew what she was talking about. Certainly one of the strangest and most baffling of sea mysteries is the case of the phantom faces that followed the gasoline tanker SS Watertown. There is no doubt about the occurrence since the faces were photographed, yet to offer a reasonable theory to explain it, even in liberal psychic terms, is prohibited by the limitations of our knowledge. So apparently the Watertown was owned by the city's service company, and a report of the case was published in the Service, the firm's House Oregon newspaper, in February 1934. Other accounts of this mystery will be found in Forgotten Mysteries by R. DeWitt Miller, The Invisible World by Herwood Carrington, Paget Magazine, 1945, and Fate Magazine, December 1963. Two seamen, James Courtney, known to his mates as Sonny Jim, and Michael Meehan, were asphyxiated by gasoline fumes while the ship was bound for the Panama Canal from San Pedro, California. They were buried off the West Mexican coast at sunset on December 4th, 1924, in 1,400 feet of water. Just before dusk on the following day, the first mate observed the ghostly heads of the two men in the midst of the waves off the port rail between the stanchions where their bodies had been slid into the sea. Their features could be clearly seen as they followed the vessel. Word of the apparitions quickly spread, and the heads were seen by practically every officer and seaman aboard by the time the tanker reached the canal. The faces were seen daily, usually in late afternoon or early evening, about 10 feet apart. They maintained a distance of about 40 feet from the vessel, remaining in view for periods of about 10 seconds, then fading away only to reappear, somewhat larger than physical heads. They appeared to float in the crest of the waves. They took this picture. So anyways, before the Westertown left on her return voyage, the mate obtained a camera, which was checked for defects, and Patton purchased a roll of film. When the tanker was again in the Pacific, the heads reappeared. So they took 5 shots of the heads, 6 shots. 5 of the shots showed nothing unusual, but the 6th was astonishing. So, all right, if you saw them once or twice, you might think it was just in your imagination. But when you can see it on your second trip, when you bring a camera this time, and they reappear and you shoot a picture, that's a bit unusual. So think about that. We've been talking about Project Montauk, mind control, time tunnels, the USS Aldrich, electronics put around the railings, the ship moving in time, disappearing, coming back with people half in and half out of the bulkhead. How believable is that? With that question I ask, how believable is this? Get my point? What is reality? What is with the powers that be trying to do the global biodiversity assessment? Assessing all the assets of the planet. Trying to take away property rights, Agenda 21. This is a summary for policymakers. Using the excuse of global warming, which doesn't exist, and invading our cities and towns. If you go look up Lisa Haven, Model United Nations Association, Munich. Different documents here. Lisa Haven was pointing out that all the cities in the United States were involved in this, so I decided to check overseas. And I found it when the first place I checked was Munich. So anyways, those two faces. Up to around 10 seconds, then fading away only to reappear. Somewhat larger than physical heads, they appear to float on the crest of the waves. I said that before. So 5 of the shots showed nothing, the 6th was astonishing. The two faces are clearly in view off the port rail. Courtney's head is visible between the stanchions, and it is not as clear as that of the bald-headed Meehan, which is remarkably lifelike. Both heads were always visible at the same time, and the optical effects would not consistently appear in pairs. So they always appeared together. In the photograph, the heads are in the same positions the witness saw them. Finally, the features of the faces correspond to their actual appearance in life, and they appeared after their deaths to their shipmates. In all the weird annuals of the seas, this case is unique. By what strange laws, in what strange realm, limited the appearance of these apparitions to the water, and only in the ocean that had received their mortal remains? So they have a few pictures in this book. The Hudson steamer became a ghost of the Arctic Sea. So there are many stories like this, and I'm sure I have many books. Here's that picture of the two guys. I suppose what I'm trying to do is just to show there's more to reality than we know. And it might behoove us to use our brains and look into it. Strange things are going on in the world. I think very few people will disagree with that. Murdering all the Arabs in the Middle East, the ones that don't flee for their lives. The other ones that remain, who try to survive, are called insurgents or terrorists. And people in the world who try to tell the truth are called anti-government belligerents. And more craziness. So just remember, we talked about Atlantis, destroyed. What is reality? We've been reading this book, The Philadelphia Experiment. We have more to go over. We got Aleister Crowley, who was talking to a master, who wrote his own version of, I guess, the Book of the Law. Which, you know, all that chaos going over there in the Middle East, in Baghdad, Babylon area. The pyramids, the Sphinx. Even in Aleister Crowley, the evilest man alive's book is the guy with the parrot head there. Horus, the god Horus. Which is also depicted as the all-seeing eye on the US dollar bill. Notice on the top of this picture is an owl. Right above the round circle. And if you look on the dollar bill on the front side, on the right one, perched on the little loop there, is an owl. You might need a magnifying glass. And his information came from some being, Hiowas, that he drew a picture of. And it looked like Whitley Strieber's gray alien. Hiowas said he was the god of war and vengeance. So I'm just saying, it would behoove us to try to pay attention to what's going on. What is real? Did they abduct thousands and thousands of young boys at the end of Long Island and experiment with them creating some kind of electromagnetic vortex, time portal, like CERN, they say they're doing, in Geneva, Switzerland. Actually, home of the myth Frankenstein, and apparently home for 1,000 years of the Illuminati, the Mystery School of Babylon, the Luciferian satanic cult that secretly rules the world, causing the crisis actors, school shootings, and other stuff, probably the Paris bombing, so that they can sway public opinion towards this new world order that George Bush, Kissinger, the Pope, Obama, everybody's talking about. Just saying, everything's connected. Going back to this book, the late Captain C.B. Foster, who was well known in Miami, Florida shipping circles, assumed command of the vessel in 1920s. Soon after he left New York for Durban, South Africa, the ship sprang a leak which was repaired with difficulty. So this would have been the schooner Nancy Hanks, was another famous haunted ship. A graceful three-master, 200-foot long, she roamed the world. Then a monstrous black cat with flaming eyes that haunted the vessel appeared. Always a warning of trouble. So here's a ship that has this monstrous black cat that appears with flaming eyes. And then it's always a warning of trouble. A severe storm damaged the schooner. Before the crew could rest up, the cat, trailed by 4 kittens, again appeared, and another gale battered the ship, leaving Durban for West Africa ports. The devil-eyed cat cropped up, followed by a third storm. So every time this monstrous black cat with flaming eyes shows up, they have monstrous storms appear. A cargo of mahogany was shipped for Boston, and the Nancy Hanks set sail, only to have the infernal cat loom up, bringing with it a squall and an outbreak from some African fever. With 2 weakened seamen, Captain Foster struggled on, but a sudden storm swept away the canvas, which the enfeebled sailors could not reef. Finally, the schooner managed to reach Boston. Captain Foster resigned, and the ship was commissioned to carry coast-wide cargoes. One day she was found off Miami flying distress signals. The Coast Guard found that the captain had been washed overboard, and a mutiny followed in which another officer had been killed. Seems like this ship is plagued with problems. So finally she was destroyed by fire, believed to have been set by superstitious seamen. But of all the haunted vessels that have plagued the Earth's seamen, the Russian horror ship Ivan Vasily was the worst. Her almost unbelievable story is a grim warning that forces of inestimable evil beyond our ken may occasionally break through the barriers into our known world. This is what I'm trying to say. And we're talking about UFOs and aliens, ghosts and ships, black cats with flaming eyes. It begs the question, what is reality? Built in 1897, the Ivan Vasily led a normal marine existence for 5 years. Then early 1903, as Russia was preparing for her ill-fated war with Japan, the steamer was sent from the Baltic to Vladivostok with a cargo of military supplies. So they're about to have a war with Japan. And the Japanese are pretty well known for being into the mystery schools of Babylon. Just saying, you know, what are the religions of the peoples of the Japanese islands? Do they have the knowledge of things like voodoo, witchcraft, Kabbalah? What is it with the different religions of the Hindu people of India and Buddhists, the beings with many arms, and the Shiva and Kali, goddess of destruction, that's at CERN? Just wonder, could some kind of curse have been put on these ships? Some of them. What kind of powers can these people into witchcraft have? This series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And I'm keeping an open mind reading about these different issues, trying to find the common denominators. So Russia was preparing for an ill-fated war with Japan. The steamer was sent from the Baltic to Vladivostok with a cargo of military supplies. In the midst of the voyage, this force, known as the Thing, struck. What it was or is, no man can say. And in the Project Montauk, they have something called the chair. Apparently it amplifies your psychic abilities. And I think Duncan, one of the characters, Duncan Cameron, wanted to shut down the Project Montauk program of mind controlling the boys in the time portals, thinking they were dangerous to the world. So he created this monster on the base. It's in these books I'm reading. We'll go over that. Or you can go on the internet and look at some of the Project Montauk videos with Duncan Cameron, Preston Nichols. I've been reviewing them. Stuart Swervelow, Al Beback, Peter Moon. All this stuff I've been going over on this marathon of Peter Moon, Project Montauk, Philadelphia Experiment, Mind Control series, starting with number 73 of my series, and we're up to 79 now. I just thought if we just explored it and explored it and explored it with the UFOs and aliens and Roswell, the involvement of the government, apparently making agreements that the aliens could abduct some people for body parts and experimentation in exchange for technologies that our government can have. For what nefarious purposes? All these crazy things that we're looking into. Just saying, it seems to be what it seems to be. So in the midst of the voyage, the Ivan Vesely led a normal marine existence. Then the war started with Japan. And this force, that's known as the Thing, struck. What it was, what it is, no man can say. Its first effect was a sudden feeling that an invisible being was standing nearby. Then came a shock of terror, cold and paralyzing, that drained away all energy, like some ghastly suction pump. At times, a faintly luminous, misty form, vaguely resembling a human being, could be observed. Oh my! But whatever it was on board. Just before the ship reached Port Arthur, on a calm, clear night, a crewman standing on deck suddenly screamed. Fear is contagious, and panic followed. Speaking of that, you know, if they do cause some kind of nuclear explosion in some U.S. harbor to bring about the New World Order, have to declare martial law, shut down the nation, say they can't trust anybody going anywhere unless they're microchipped, no food at the grocery stores or water, and I just wonder, like it says in the book here, fear is contagious, and panic followed. Will we, the people of the USA and the world, panic and will be contagious and insane riotous? Is that the plan? Just me using my God-given brain. For 20 minutes, the crew prayed and shouted and fought, running blindly about the vessel. Finally, a sailor, Alex Jovinsky, jumped overboard into the sea to his death. With the sacrifice of blood to the mysterious menace, the spell of horror was broken. Again, with the witchcraft covens, witches, and Illuminati, and eyewitness testimony to the sacrificing of human beings to some entity, like the Bohemian Grove, where they have the giant owl with the fire in the belly, and they throw a baby into it. They say it's an effigy, not a real baby. I say, what the heck does it matter? And how do we know it's an effigy? Dressing in long robes, bringing gay men for some kind of satanic sexual ritual, screaming and hollering like a demonic Kali dance. And our presidents and other famous people have been photographed at the Bohemian Grove. Alex Jones snuck in there and took a video. Go watch it. See what you think. And then we read about this stuff here. With the sacrifice of blood to the mysterious menace, the spell of horror was broken, and the men fell on the decks in physical exhaustion. 3 days later, there was another outbreak of hysteria. On the following day, the Versailles reached Vladivostok. A dozen men attempted to desert, but they were recaptured. With their cargo safely ashore, the steamer sailed for Hong Kong. It was a nightmare voyage. 2 seamen committed suicide. 1 died of fright. And shortly before reaching port, the captain, Steve Andrest, jumped overboard and drowned. After each death, the thing seemed satisfied for a few brief hours, and then waves of horror would start anew. So this evil entity, the thing, apparently thrived on the death of somebody, a sacrifice. I'm reminded of the witchcraft, and I found this out. It's too bizarre to believe. But just go look up witchcraft and holidays. If you have the stomach for it, you might get shocked what you find. Or Arizona Wilder with David Icke in their interview. And many other people on my website, rickmiracle.com. I have a page of all the different videos of whistleblowers and eyewitnesses. People who were sex slaves who were able to escape and tell all. Kathy O'Brien is another one. There are many of them. Insiders of the Illuminati. There are many of them. There are videos on YouTube. And books and websites. I just suggest that we open our minds and look into this. If it is real, and it seems like it is, and a lot of people who apparently were abducted by aliens called out in Jesus' name and were immediately released. That might be a valuable thing to know. If there is this end times of the world coming, and he who seeks refuge in me, I shall be thy shield, is in Proverbs in the Bible. So if you seek refuge in God or Jesus, you may be able to protect yourself if all this is real. And again, we're just not trying to find out, I am, and share with people the discussion of what is reality. So 12 men attempted to desert, but they were recaptured. With their cargo safely ashore, the steamer sailed for Hong Kong on a nightmare voyage. We read all that. After each death, the thing seemed satisfied for a few brief hours. Then waves of horror would start anew. Just saying. Aleister Crowley and his Do As Thou Wilt, and the desire to bring about chaos and anarchy, and rid the world of Christianity, probably say that those who still believe in Jesus are criminals. And his being looks like this guy. who says, his name was Hioas, who says he's the god of war and vengeance. And that seems to be the popular religion people are embracing now with the New Age. Can't make this stuff up. At Hong Kong, the entire crew deserted with the exception of Chris Hansen, a second officer, and 5 Scandinavian hands. Hansen, a Swede, made himself captain, and with a crew of Chinese and Lascars, he set sail for Sydney. Again, the thing struck with its tentacles of doom, and before the vessel could reach Australia, Captain Hansen had shot himself. Once in the harbor at Sydney, the crew disappeared into the city. Only one man, Harry Nelson, dared to stay with the ship. Vasselli was outward bound for San Francisco. And again, the terror panic came 3 times, and 3 men died, leaping overboard. And again, a fear-crazed captain, tormented beyond endurance by a hellish, invisible octopus that fed on man's sanity, shot himself. So what is this thing, this hellish, invisible octopus that fed on man's insanity? Could the Philadelphia experiment have really happened? Could this other stuff I'm going over, speak right on this new year, this other stuff I'm going over, be true? It would seem that if one is true, and I have much more evidence, then this could be true. Just say it. Harry Nelson managed to survive the horror. Persistent in his efforts to solve the mystery, he could learn little about it, however, except that the strange panic ended as soon as it had found a victim. Once a man died, the thing seemed to leave the ship. Nelson succeeded in returning the cursed craft to her home, port of Valdivia, where she remained. No sailor, no matter how much extra pay or bonus he was offered, would board her. For years she floated in the harbor, avoided, shunned, feared. Finally, she was given the one treatment, the sure remedy for all objects of evil that exist in this world. She was burned. Remember in the Bible, Jesus would be walking into a village when I did that Gospel of St. Mark. And I'm going to do more of the Gospels. I think Gospel of Matthew next, one I do on that. But this one man was acting like a deranged, mentally ill, crippled. And when he saw Jesus walking down the trail coming towards the village, he looked up and shot out at Jesus and he said, "Why are you here? It is not my time." You can go read this. And Jesus says, "Out of him, unclean spirit." And the spiritual entity left the man, and the man became normal. So, if we believe in the Bible, we believe that's true. And even when they had 4,000 people that he was speaking to, Jesus, and it was time to eat, and the disciple says, "What are we going to do? We don't have enough to feed all these people. We can't send them home hungry." And Jesus spoke up into the sky, and the 2 fish and the 3 loaves of bread turned into baskets of food to feed 4,000. If we are to believe the Bible, and then we are to read stuff like this, for all objects of evil that exist in the world, there is only one sure remedy. She was burned. And remember, over there in Europe, they would burn witches at the stake. We have satanic, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism. The Freemasons, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Zionists, Kabbalah, Jesuits, and all the secret mystery school of Babylon cults and lodges and temples are into some kind of magical secret stuff. What? Why are they sky spraying us? Why building those HARP systems? Why do they have, I think, lasers in space? And on jets, you can look this up and see some of the videos that could take down the Twin Towers. That was an inside job. Why did they do that? To take over the Middle East. Why is Israel vying to rebuild King Solomon's temple? And King Solomon had a magic ring with a six-pointed star that he could call forth demons. That's how he got his power. All this is biblical. When Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days, after he was baptized by John the Baptist, and he was ministered to by angels, what is all that? Just saying, what's reality? For what was this horror from out of the nightmare realms of an endless unknown? There are sacraments of evil as well as of good about us, and we live and move, to my belief, in an unknown world. Wrote Arthur Mitchum, a place where there are caves and shadows and dwellers in twilight. It is my belief that an awful lore is not yet dead. So that was the end of that chapter. And I think I'll continue on with this video where it talks about the Philadelphia experiment. Is there an answer in this book, Invisible Horizons? All right, well, that was some interesting information. Ghost apparitions and things, evil forces, black-eyed cats with fiery eyes on ships, and that's just a tiny tidbit of the documentation out there on those realities throughout history. Yes? No? So I thought I'd just talk about a few other things before I move on to the last part of that book. Invisible Horizons. True Mysteries of the Sea. So I just went to my bookcase, grabbed a couple books as I usually do. Here's one I need to read. Dr. Bruce Goldberg, Astral Voyages, Mastering the Art of Interdimensional Travel. What's that all about? Free yourself from the limitations of the earth plane and the laws of space and time with the help of Astral Voyages, the most comprehensive astral travel book on the market. Ought to be an interesting read. Remember, we're talking about the Philadelphia experiment, the ship that disappeared, Project Montauk, mind control, time portals, abducting children, and involving Aleister Crowley, the evilest man alive, who was also involved in JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which was the precursor to NASA, and the satanic rituals they do, invoking beings, interdimensional beings. Aleister Crowley was communicating with that Hiowas creature, which looks like a gray alien. Conscience, out-of-the-body experience, self-hypnosis techniques. I'd like to learn how to do that, but I do understand it's dangerous. With that in mind, the United Nations and Lisa Haven's introduction to the topic that I found astounding the other day, that our country in the United States, and I thought after seeing her video, the world, is being invaded by United Nations Association organizations. It's called Model United Nations Association. And this one I just checked out Munich, Germany. I'll check out some more. So this website is MUNAM, MUNAM, Model United Nations Association, Munich, Germany. So they're going into our communities, involving a lot of young people. Who knows what propaganda they're feeding into the minds? But we can say they're trying to bring about a one world order. Meanwhile, you got astral travel. And also, apparently they have a Facebook for this Moonam with the United Nations symbol. And FYI, the cult of the all-seeing eye, the United Nations meditation room. The black iron stone there in the middle of the room with that unusual wall. The Temple of Understanding in the back of this book. The Temple of Understanding, the Great Seal of the United States, a prayer room in the United States Capitol. This is obviously not Christianity. The leaflet made available to those who visit the meditation room was written under the direction of Dag Hammarskjöld. Its description of the room is deliberately couched in abstruse language. It contains terms which have meaning to the esoterically inclined, but not to the uninitiated. In this little... So somebody wrote a book about the United Nations Meditation Room. There's the symbol, similar on the US dollar bill. The cult of the all-seeing eye, that would be Horus, that Egyptian hieroglyphic person with the bird head. Remember, this is Freemasonry for the uninitiated, and Satanism and Freemasonry Illuminati, Zionism, Jesuits, into the mystery school of Babylon. Their deity is Lucifer, sometimes called Baal, Moloch, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, many other names. So I just thought I'd mention this, that people could go look it up. There's something strange going on. The Seal of the United States. So it's a pretty well researched document. The prayer room in the United States Capitol. Here's another New Age symbol. It says New Age on there. So you can probably go online and find this little pamphlet. Reminding ourselves, according to Lisa Haven's research, which brought to my attention the United Nations Association springing up in communities everywhere. Then I noticed this little document here. The fear tactics don't stop. What does the world do when the water runs out? Fear, fear, fear. I got this other book, The Great Controversy, The Global War on Freedom. I'll have to go over this and bring to our attention the Swiss Reformer. Need to remind ourselves what's going on over there in Switzerland, Geneva, CERN, the place where the cult of Frankenstein monster comes from, the homeland for the Illuminati for 1,000 years. Just an interesting book here. I have a lot of work to do. 2016 ought to be interesting. I've been going over this book over and over and over again. Coming from the United Nations, brought to every neighborhood near you, The Wrenching Transformation of America, Agenda 21. Sustainable medicine plus sustainable development, duty to die. Remember, Ted Turner, Prince of England, Bill Gates, all said there's too many people and they need to die. And in my Zionism marathon I went on, from number 66 to 71 in my series of many different books, Robert Williams, The Ultimate World Order. His investigation of a book he discovered in the Texas library that caused him to do this book, which I couldn't obtain a copy, so I printed out the PDF formula. The Jewish Utopia by Professor Michael Higger, PhD, of course. We went over that. And then, of course, the guidebook for the destruction of mankind, non-Jews, The Protocols of Zion. You can go online and print that out. What I am about to set forth, then, is our system from 2 points of view. That of ourselves and that of the Goyim. We non-Jews are going to them. It must be noted that men with bad instincts are more in number than the good, and therefore the best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorization. The best results in governing them is attained by violence and terrorization, and not by academic discussions. Every man aims at power. Everyone would like to become a dictator, if only he could. And rare indeed are the men who are not willing to sacrifice the welfare for all for the sake of securing their own welfare. What has restrained the beasts of prey who are called men? This is what they think about the rest of us. Now, I understand rationalization. In college, I took Psychology 101 and 102. And a murderer thinks other people murder. A pedophilia, child molester, thinks other people do it. They rationalize. They don't walk around thinking, I'm terrible, I'm bad. A thief thinks everybody else steals. Political freedom is an idea, but not a fact. This is what these people think. You need to go online and print out a copy, if you haven't already. And again, getting back to the United Nations, and I keep going over this document for good reason from what we just saw, United Nations Meditation Room. They're into the cult of the Mystery School of Babylon, Kabbalah, witchcraft, Illuminati, paganism, the ancient gods, global biodiversity assessment, Summary for Policymakers. And as we just saw, the Model United Nations Association in every town, according to Lisa Haven's research, and I found out, apparently, all over the world. Another book I need to read, The Mind Race, Understanding and Using Psychic Ability. Russell Targ and Keith Hardy. Harness all the powers of your mind. Psychic ability can help you face decisions that must be made with adequate information. Promote stronger emotional bonds with close and distant friends. Forecast the future. Locate lost objects, missing persons, archaeological sites, and hidden natural resources. And as we know from my previous videos, I'm a little skilled in those things. I can hold this over a glass of tap water and tell me on a scale of 1 to 100% how good is the water, and it'll go to 20 or 30%. Then I'll hold the pendulum over a glass of spring water, and it'll give me 60 or 70%. And you can do a blind testing, having somebody pour the 2 glasses and not tell you, and check it out yourself. There's many things you can do accessing your subconscious mind. We are more powerful than we know. We are spiritual beings in these biological bodies, after all. So the first paragraph here on one of these chapters, I just flipped it open. PSA in everyday life. I'm going to read these books, giving you a little preview here of what's coming up in the future in my videos. After you have developed some measure of psychic ability yourself, you will find it useful when faced with decisions that must be made without adequate information. But the most obvious reason for developing PSI is simply the enjoyment of having an additional perception ability, with which to experience all aspects of your life and environment. We should develop these abilities because it is possible for us to do so, and because doing so will enrich our lives. And as I keep saying with this series, Freemasonry and Satanism, the people running our planet are privy to more knowledge than the rest of us have, and they're into the secret mystery schools of Babylon, and they're using that knowledge against us, destroying the economy, trying to create situations for chaos and anarchy so they can enact martial law to bring about the New World Order in the New Age. The United Nations is spending billions promoting the gay agenda, anti-decency, anti-Christian social reality they want to bring about, with Lucifer being their deity, Satan the devil. You can't make this stuff up. And lastly, 2 more books I noticed I'd mention. I read this a long time ago before I was highlighting material, and I need to read it again. Big, thick book. But who financed Hitler? It all came from the Zionist bankster Jews and associated Illuminati bought and paid for politicians of New York and other places of the world to bring about Hitler's rise to power, for further action of more world domination, police powers, eradication of a lot of people. And another book by Anthony Sutton, a well-known writer, Wall Street and the Rise to Hitler. Just saying things in the future I need to go over. But in the meantime, let's try to finish up this book that I went over those entities and mysteries from the ships at sea that we just went over, because it was referenced in my Philadelphia experiment material. And the last chapter is there an answer to the mystery of things like these apparitions in the water? Is there an answer? What's with the United Nations meditation room and the efforts of the Masonic Freemasons, Rosicrucian, all the different mystery schools and temples, the Zionists also, the bad Jewish folks? Not to be confused with a lot of Jewish folks worldwide who don't have a clue about what's going on. But then again, I'm watching that one conference they had in Washington, D.C. with one of the Jewish associations, and the speaker was speaking, and all the Jewish people there were clapping their hands and giving standing ovations. So a lot of people are in on this New World Order, controlled probably from the Vatican, and also Israel, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem, and some other places, bringing us a world like the movie Hunger Games. Crazy, you think? So let's read about, is there an answer from this book? Did the Navy, U.S. Navy, in a classified experiment during wartime secretly apply Dr. Albert Einstein's unified theory and successfully cause a warship and its crew to become invisible? Were the experiments abandoned when sailors involved continued to be accompanied by force fields after leaving the vessel that caused them to suffer occasional attacks of invisibility, immobility, and even insanity? So even after these sailors left the ship, the USS Aldrich, in the Philadelphia experiment, after it disappeared and reappeared different places like a mirage around the world, and then reappeared back at its home port, when the sailors left, they would be standing in a bar or on the street, and they would kind of fade out of existence. Eventually, they all died. At one time during the experiments, was the warship unaccountably transported from Philadelphia to its berth near Norfolk. So it is my theory from reading this material that the ship wasn't sent to places it had never been. It went to places that it had been. So it went back in its own time. That's an interesting point of view. It didn't go to places it had never sailed to. It just reappeared in places that it had been previously. The story that raises these fantastic questions began in 1955 when the case for the UFO was first of 4 books on unidentified flying objects written by the late Morris K. Jessup was published by the Citadel Press, New York. We went over that. And then we got the book back, delivered to the Navy, with all kinds of marked up notes inside. The case for the UFO was the book published. The edition here was marked up by somebody. Some say aliens or some beings on Earth who knew more than they should know. You can see the different italics by the publishing company. It was actually in handwriting in different colors when they first got it. But when it was published, they identified it by different things. And then accompanying that whole conspiracy theory or mystery was the Allende letters from Carlos Allende. So tie in the Allende letters with the Vero edition of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFOs, brought about this whole mystery of the Philadelphia experiment. Dr. Jessup brought to this controversial subject the background of an extraordinary career. He had been an instructor in astronomy and mathematics at the University of Michigan, at the Drake University. After receiving his PhD degree in astrophysics, he erected and operated the largest refracting telescope in the southern hemisphere in South Africa for the University of Michigan. There, his research program resulted in the discovery of numerous double stars now cataloged by the Royal Astronomical Society. Well, that's an interesting history. Later, he studied the sources of crude rubber along the headwaters of the Amazon for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. His interest now turned to exploration, and he participated in archaeological studies of the Mayan ruins in the jungles of Central America for the Carnegie Institute of Washington, another organization run by the Illuminati cults. Carnegie Institute of Washington, in my opinion, like the Ford Foundation, Heritage Foundation. Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Groups, Club of Rome, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger Group, and on and on and on. Jessup's book, The Case for the UFOs, discussed in the more mysterious phenomenon in the fields of astronomy, meteorology, and the history of these sciences, as well as the problems of space travel. He believed that the use of rockets limited the distance we could reach, and that man would have to discover the nature and application of gravity before he could navigate in outer space. Just reading my highlighted portions here. Again, just trying to elaborate on this series, Freemasonry and Satanism, that there is more to reality than we all know. The powers that be are clearly, with these materials I've shown you, trying to destroy Christianity. Why? And bring us this new religion of Luciferian doctrine, and where the Zionist Jews in their Bible, the Talmud, says the best of the goyim shall be killed, as I've gone over in previous videos. They're working against we the people, trying to destroy the middle class. How many people will disagree with that these days? Jade Helm putting troops and equipment all over the United States, not telling anybody why. Denying its very existence when you can see it. Denying that there's sky-spraying chemicals in the sky when you can see it. Denying that the HARP systems are operational when they're building more. Vaccine investigated by doctors, mysteriously dying. Biologists mysteriously dying. Astronomers are mysteriously dying. Military leaders being let go. Who's replacing them? Who's at the helm of these submarines now with nuclear bombs? Why did they get rid of all those officers? Makes one wonder. Moving on, my investigation about mind control, time tunnels, disappearing ships, and the reality we live in. Moving on here. After commenting on several subjects discussed in Jessup's book, it gives details of an alleged secret Navy experiment in October 1943, in which a ship was rendered invisible with disastrous results to the crew. The writer indicated he was in the service at the time and was a witness. Jessup's first reaction was that the letter was either a hoax or the rantings of a crackpot. The very nature of UFO investigation attracts twisted and unstable minds. Remember, you do this kind of research, Hitler and their Wall Street, or who financed Hitler, and you expose any of these people in power working towards this, or the United Nations material in Agenda 21, they're liable to call you an anti-government belligerent, mentally unstable, because you can see that there's sky-spraying chemicals in the sky. If they tell you they're not doing it, they're not doing it, no matter if you can see it or photograph it. That appears to be the way the powers that be want us to behave. Thoughtless zombies. Meanwhile, on the other hand, perhaps the writer was giving an exaggerated account of an actual occurrence. There were many classified experiments made during World War II. In 1943, research was in the progress that led to the creation of the atomic bomb, which apparently was initiated, if you're not going to believe this, at the Bohemian Grove in California. They had the meeting and their first discussions about the creating the nuclear bomb, where they have the giant owl with a fire in the belly, and they throw in a baby. And the whole setting is like a witchcraft ritual, screaming and hollowing. And the men are in long robes, no women allowed, and bringing in gay men, I guess, for satanic sexual rituals or something. Alex Jones videoed it. Don't believe me? Go look it up. Alex Jones videoing Bohemian Grove. Then you decide. I read and report. Alright, so now we're moving on this book here. There's much more to read. I'm just reading my paragraphs. Now, Jessup began reading the comments with growing bewilderment. So they called Jessup in, the Navy, and said, hey, we got your book here with a bunch of comments. It's very mysterious to us. What's your explanation, Dr. Jessup? Anyway, so they implied intimate knowledge of UFOs, their methods of propulsion, and the origin and background of the beings operating them. Many of the comments were teasers, hinting at a store of alien information, bizarre and fantastic. So did the Navy get a copy of Jessup's book in the mail, marked up with information in 3 different color, handwriting and ink, seemingly coming from aliens, hinting at secrets? And the Navy had Jessup's book all marked up, so they called Mr. Jessup. He recognized the handwriting on one of the 3 to be the same as some letters he had been receiving from Carlos Allende, and that's why it says on the front of this book, the Allende letters. And he said, well, one of the writers has been sending me letters. Thus became the exposed knowledge about the Philadelphia experiment and the disappearing ship. And when it did reappear, some people were half in and half out of the steel bulkheads. And some of them, when they got off the ship, were phasing in and out of existence. And I know what you're thinking. All that's crazy. But at least we forget, we just went over that book, this book. And they got these ghost beings repeatedly, with many witnesses, following this gasoline tanker. 2 guys who were asphyxiated with the fumes and died, and buried at sea. So moving on, then Jessup noticed a passage that seemed to answer his question. It referred to a secret Navy experiment in 1943. As he continued reading, he found other references to the invisible ship. Moreover, they were written in the same style and used the same terms and wording in the letters that he had received earlier. There could be little doubt that Carlos Allende was one of the writers of the annotated book. So the annotated book was reproduced by Vero Manufacturing Company in Garland, Texas. That's why it says on here, the Vero edition. So the Navy wanted many copies of this marked up book sent to many scientists and leaders in the world for their opinion and research. Is it real? Was this real? Were there other stories about that thing on the ship that horrified everybody to jump overboard or shoot themselves? Or that one with the big black cat with fiery eyes that caused everybody to go insane? Moving on this book, is there an answer? The case for UFOs. Because of the importance which we attach to the possibility of discovering clues to the nature of gravity, no possible item, however disreputable, from the point of view of classical science, can be overlooked. The annotated copy, addressed to Admiral Forth, Chief Office of Navy Research, Washington, 25 D.C., came in a manila envelope, postmarked Seminole, Texas, 1955. Written across the face of the envelope in ink was Happy Easter. Guess this Carlos Alendi guy had a sense of humor. It is probable that these men are gypsies. In the closing pages of the book, Mr. B says, only a gypsy will tell of the catastrophe. And we are a discredited people, ages ago. Ha! Yet man wonders where we come from. So wait a minute, gypsy. I'm thinking of the other thing I mention often enough. In Munich, Germany, in Hitler's diary, as told in Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, a Munich gypsy man was abducted, laid on an altar to sacrifice, to bring forth an interdimensional spirit, to impregnate a girl that laid on an adjoining altar, to create some kind of supreme being. Rabbi Marvin Antelman, who exposes all the evil of Frankish Sabbatan Jewish folks who turned to the Luciferian doctrine, the mystery school of Babylon, the reformers. So why would Rabbi Marvin Antelman put that in his book to eliminate the opate? Opate means the belief in God. And why would Hitler's diary have that gypsy man being abducted, sacrificed to bring forth a being, spiritual being, that apparently did appear, was visible, but failed to impregnate the young girl? Again, more evidence, more evidence, more evidence telling us that there's more to reality than what we know, which is a huge point of my videos in Freemasonry and Satanism. All right, moving on. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what the heck is going on. Why are they spraying stuff in the sky? Building HARP systems, Gwen towers, ground wave. Spying on everybody. Snowden told us that. Cameras everywhere. Gigantic computers called the Beast. Monitoring everything. Chips on your credit card and debit card now. I noticed they have a new machine I slide it into. Microchipping children. California, Texas. And more. What's going on with this New Age, New World Order, United Nations, Agenda 21, that model United Nations Association they're forming? There's a lot of craziness going on in the background, in secret. Charles Leland, in his book, English Gypsies and Their Language, states that the gypsies call each other brother and sister. Makes you wonder who these gypsies are and why they picked a gypsy to when Hitler was trying to sacrifice somebody to bring forth an evil spirit, to impregnate the young girl of the cult. And they are not in the habit of admitting to their fellowship people of a different blood and with whom they have no sympathy. And we know the Illuminati, the blue bloods, the wealthy people, only intermarry and do not want to corrupt their DNA or their power and hold on the world. What's going on? Invisible Horizons. I'm only reading portions of it, and there's much more, many more chapters in here on these mysterious goings-on. So here it says, it might be helpful for you to know a little more about the nature of the notes before you begin reading this book. The notes refer to two types of people living in space, specifically the status neutral and the undersea are mentioned as habitats. They seem to live in both interchangeably. So there's some stuff written here in these the Case for UFO books. The building of undersea cities is mentioned. Many different kinds of ships are used as transportation. These two peoples, races, or whatever they may be called, are referred to over and over again. They are called LMs and SMs. These are part of the notes in that Jessup Morris's book, The Case for UFOs, this author's talking about some of those notes. The LMs seem to be peaceful. The SMs are not. It seems that the annotations are inclined toward the LMs as they speak more kindly of them than the SMs. So two types of creatures on this planet. Maybe, other than we humans, are the LMs and the SMs. Terms such as mothership, home fleet, great ark, great bombardment, great return, great war, little men, force fields, deep freezes, undersea buildings, measure markers, scout ships, magnetic gravity, fields, inlay work, clear talk, telepathy, burning coat, nodes, vortexes, magnetic net, and many others are used quite naturally by these men in their notes in Jessup's book, The Case for UFOs, that was sent to the Navy. Just saying that other people have investigated this, and I'm sharing where I find the other information in my videos so we have a broader knowledge of what the heck is going on here. What is true, what is not. These men seem to feel that it is too late for man to obtain spaceflight. They feel that mankind could not cope with those weak, wrecking conditions that sea and space contain. For man is too egotistical, values too much the material, wars over more parcels of this planet, is too filled with jealousy and lacks true brotherhood. That's what the aliens think of us. I'm saying that those are the kind of people on this planet. Seems they all make their way towards Washington, D.C., and they're our politicians. They don't put too many decent people on Washington Hill, or like Kennedy, they would probably be assassinated. Is this what we're dealing with? Since both letters are very long and somewhat repetitive, and difficult to read, I will summarize their contents. That's this author about the Allende letters. In his first letter, Allende referred to Jessup's plea that further research be made into Einstein's unified field theory, stating it was not necessary. It may interest you to know, he wrote, that the good doctor was not so much influenced by mathematics in his retraction of the work as he was by humantics. His later computations upon cycles of human civilization and progress compared to the growth of man's general overall character were enough to horrify him. Thus we are told today that the theory was incomplete. Remember H.G. Wells in his books on conspiracy, world conspiracy theory, New World Order, etc. He wrote some other interesting books about time tunnels, stuff like that. He said that the humans on Earth are nothing more than animals not to be trusted. In the Freemasonic books I've gone over, they call us non-Masons profane. And of course, in the Protocols of Zion and the Talmud, the Zionist bad Jewish folks call us goyim, which means cattle. Just FYI, things we ought to know. What they think of us. And they're the ones running the world into the ground. And we know about rationalization in psychology. When you accuse somebody else of something, if you turn the mirror around, it usually means it's you. A thief thinks everybody else is a thief. A sexual pervert thinks everybody else is a sexual pervert. A liar thinks everybody else lies. So when you read this stuff in the Protocols of Zion and the Talmud, you have some very evil people who think everybody else must be evil. Just my rationalization. According to Psychology 101 and Psychology 102, rationalization, look it up. Anyways, going on in this book here, when they got stuck, the man cannot move of his own violation unless two or more of those within the field go and touch him quickly, else he freezes. the writer called the act of the laying on of the hands. So apparently on this ship that disappeared, when it reappeared, the people would be frozen. And one sailor or another would have to come over and touch them to unfreeze them. And if they didn't do it quick enough, the sailor was doomed. If a man freezes, his position must be marked out carefully, and then the field is cut off. Everyone but that frozen man is able to move. So this experiment where the ship disappeared was very dangerous for humans. It was a success as far as the ship disappearing, but they had to figure out the human factor. Appreciate apparently solidarity again. Then the newest member of the crew must approach the spot where he will find the frozen man's face or bare skin that is not covered by usual uniform clothing. Sometimes it takes only an hour, or sometimes all night and all day long, and worse, it once took 6 months to get the man unfrozen. This deep freeze was not psychological. It was the result of hyperfield that was set up within the field of the body, while the scorch field is turned on, that is at length and upon an old hand. So obviously it's pretty dangerous to be in one of these fields on the initial experiments made with this technology. And it later continued on Long Island at the far end, called Montauk area, a little town. Thousands of young boys were abducted, used in these experiments. Crazy. If true, oh my God. If false, and all these books I'm showing you over and over and over and over are all propaganda, why? And we're in trouble then. What are they trying to do? Deception are they trying to do. So if it's real, we're in trouble. If it's a deception, we're in trouble. Right? The way I look at it. We're not getting the truth out of the politicians. Is anybody going to deny that? From my research, these United Nations groups, model United Nations Association, doing something in cahoots with our mayors and our elected leaders in cities and towns. What? Shouldn't we know what's going on? Biodiversity, an assessment of everything on the planet, its resources. USA Georgia Guidestones, they want to eliminate 80% or more of the world's population. Crisis actors and terrorist shootings and bombings to sway public opinion. 911, an inside job. Moving on this book here. Allende alleged that a highly complicated piece of equipment had to be constructed to unfreeze those who became true froze or deep freeze subjects. A deep freeze victim usually went insane if his condition continued for more than a day. He adds that the frozen men were not aware of time as we know it. At least we forget the spiritual of these guys in the ocean, their faces. More like a Twilight Zone movie here. You will hear phrases from these men such as caught in the flow, or the push, or stuck in the green, or stuck in the molasses. So this field felt like molasses. Interdimensional field. He continues, there are only a very few of the original experimental DE's crew left by now. So most went insane. One just walked through his quarters wall in sight of his wife and child and 2 other crew members, but was never seen again. So one of these guys went home and walked right through the wall and never was seen again. He was dematerializing right there in front of his family. 2 went into the flame, spontaneous combustion. That's been reported numerous times throughout history. People just spontaneously combustion. They froze and caught fire while carrying common small boat compasses. So the magnetic field maybe of the compass caused some kind of reaction in their auric body, which was still under the influence of this interdimensional field. One man carried the compass and caught fire. The other came for the laying on of the hands, as he was nearest, but he too took fire. The faith in laying hands died when this happened, and the men's minds went by the score. The experiment was a complete success. The men were a complete failure. According to Allende, there was a short report in the Philadelphia newspaper, sometimes in 1945, 44, and 46, describing the sailors' actions and their initial voyage. So it made the local Philadelphia newspaper. The men, apparently in a semi-visible condition, entered a tavern near the Navy Yard, shocking the waitresses. The skeptical reporters wrote a tongue-in-cheek story. Allende implies he witnessed in October 1943 experiment from an observer vessel, the SS Andrew Forsyth, a Matson Lines Liberty ship out of Norfolk. Others aboard that he remembers were Richard Speary Price of Roanoke, Virginia, Chief Mate Mosley, and a man named Connolly from New England. Following his signature, Allende wrote his number, which was his service number, Z416175. Continuing on. In a lengthy postscript, Allende says the Navy obviously did not know in advance that the hyperfield that made the ship invisible would affect the men after they left the ship. He expressed the opinion that something about the compass triggered the fire that killed two of the men, and when one or two of their men, visible within the field to all the others, just walked into nothingness, and nothing could be felt of them, either when the field was turned on or off. More fears were amassed, and the experiments were stopped. So these men would, after they went through this experiment, would just disappear. I wish to mention, Allende wrote, that somehow also the experimental ship disappeared from its Philadelphia dock, and only a very few minutes later appeared at its other dock in the Norfolk Newport News Portsmouth area. This was distinctly and clearly identified as being that place, but the ship again disappeared and went back to the Philadelphia dock in only a very few minutes or less. So the ship wasn't actually being teleported some places where it had never been. It was moving in time to places that it had been. What importance is that? Moving on to my highlighted portions here. He adds that there should have been more careful watch over such items as rings, identification bracelets, watches, belt buckles, and especially hobnailed or cleated shoes. So if you have any metal on you, if you were in one of these experiments, it created problems. Almost finishing up here. Getting my point across. Is this true or is this not true? On all these books and research I've been going over. And I have a little more to go over on other books on these same subjects. We will beat it up until we understand it. Why were Allende's curious letters added to the book? Was the Navy interested because they disclosed some information, possibly exaggerated, of a top-secret Navy experiment? And since the Vero books were never classified, did officials believe that the puzzling comments about UFOs and races in space would serve as a smokescreen of doubt over references to the invisible and teleported ship? Eventually, several copies of the Vera book drifted into civilian hands. That would be this book. You can go online and probably find it. One is M.K. Jessup and the Allende Letters by Ripley Crabb. These are books out there that you can search for. The other, The Strange Case of Dr. M.K. Jessup by Gary Baker. I've been trying to find these books. Cribb's Vero copy disappeared in 1960 when he mailed it to his California home from Washington. Strangeness there. He mails the book and it disappears. So apparently here's a highlighted sentence. So apparently Allende says, "You want camouflage, gentlemen? Give me a ship and I'll show you perfect camouflage." When this man went aboard the experimental ship, he was carrying a black box. Is it true that this man was Dr. Franklin Reno? If not, who was he? So what could this little black box do? What is the secret mystery school of Babylon? The Masonic lodges everywhere, where they go through rituals of threats of horrible death if they expose the secrets of the Masonic lodges. And the other secret mystery school of Babylon occults, organizations. It is unlikely that our story has any connection with Jessup's tragic death. However, during the months that preceded his passing, his close friends report that he seemed very tense and nervous. He gave his own Vero edition copy and personal notes on the Allende mystery to one friend in particular to be held in trust. Then he went to Florida. So Jessup, I guess, felt he was in danger, and he gave the copy of his book and his material to one of his trusted friends. Several weeks later, on the evening of April 20th, 1959, the body of 59-year-old M.K. Jessup was found in his station wagon in Dade County Park near Coral Gables, Florida. A hose attached to the vehicle's exhaust pipe led to the closed car. There were no marks of possible violence on the body. No notes were found. The death certificate lists the cause as suicide. Oh my. I thought I'd just show the index of this book, what other things that are in this book. Other issues I will read later. I have not read them all. Over the Horizon, Vanishing Islands. Fiery Phantoms and Noisy Specters. The Haunts and the Horrors. We went over that one. The Jinxed and the Damned. The Watchers and the Avengers. Bottles, Casks, and Caskets. Psychic Mysteries. Ghost Apparitions. Things that we can't explain. Floating Morgues. The Wanderer and the Homers. The Classic Drifter. The Most Famous Derelict. Out, Out. You can pause these and read these descriptions of what's in the chapters. Is there an answer? Invisible Horizons? Flames from the Sky? The Triangle of Death? The Bermuda Triangle? Looks like they have a whole little bunch of markers here for mysterious events of ships all over the planet. You can see the little letters. Where the events happened. Yeah, that's what it is. It has a list, little tiny dates, and list of events with those little numbers, what happened where. It seems like some valuable information. So you got this map with all these little numbers. And a little chart here, the map legend of what happened at those locations. So that's a lot of stuff to happen. And it seems a little unlikely that it's all lies. The photo of those men who died in the waves. Books we have here. Dr. Morris Jessup. The involvement of the United Nations, which is controlled by the Zionist communist folks, secretly conspiring to take over our planet with the New Age and the New World Order. If you pay attention, all this stuff becomes clear. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting. And if you want to donate to the cause, in the comment section is a link to the site to do that.